this was no boating accident. It wasn't a propeller, it wasn't a coral reef, and it wasn't Jack the Ripper. It was a 45. Welcome to episode 2 of the 45 ACP Slugfest. On the table here at the range today, I have 2 full-sized, you could say full-size plus, 45 ACP handguns. One very new, one very old. Well, pretty old, anyway. Let's introduce these two. First we have the Smith & Wesson 645. Circa mid-1980s, 84, 85, I want to say. I bought this pistol brand new when it first came out, was first introduced by Smith & Wesson. It was one of those gotta have it guns. And I bought it, like I say, when it was a brand new model on the market. And this is back when there were not a lot of 45 ACPs. If you wanted a 45 semi-automatic pistol, you were pretty much talking about a 1911. So Smith & Wesson threw their hat in that ring in the mid-1980s, produced this 45 ACP semi-automatic pistol, all stainless steel, heavy as a boat anchor, black nylon grips, nice checkering on front and back strap. We'll look at all those details much closer later. This is a single stack, 8 rounds in the magazine, 8+1 capacity. And laying next to the 645, we have the brand new Glock 41. So the Glock 41 represents, today's 45 ACP. This is obviously a new offering in 2014, came out in January of this year by Glock. It was introduced at SHOT Show. And this is basically built on the Glock 21 platform. Same exact frame, longer barrel, more of a competition sized barrel and slide. The slide is almost identical to the Glock 34, 35, if you're familiar with those, just about the same weight. This pistol is actually slightly lighter than the Glock 21, but the barrel is longer. Both of these guns have about the same barrel length. We're in the 5-inch range on both of these. So I thought I'd do a little comparison of old school versus new school, hammer fired versus striker fired, double stack versus single stack. There's a lot of differences between these. There's a few similarities. Let's see how they stack up against each other. The Smith & Wesson 645, one of my all-time favorites. A little blast from the past. And you can hear my range neighbors are making a lot of noise out here today, so let's see if we can't make some of our own. Extended 10-round magazine. It's definitely an aftermarket product. All right, we just put about 26 rounds from the 645 into this target. Let's take a look. Not too shabby. She is a sweet shooter. And now something a little newer, the Glock 41, 2014. So we got 1984 or so versus 2014. Happen to have another target over there. Got 2 targets, 2 guns. I think I know what to do with that. Let's go see how we did. Glock 41, 24 rounds. See, we started out a little more spread, especially these bottom ones down in here. These bottom guys down in here, those were some of my earlier shots. I adjusted my grip to the brick that is the Glock 41 frame, and then they tightened up nicely. Okay, so the Smith & Wesson Model 645, the Glock 41. Why compare these two? Well, why not? They're both 45 ACP. As you can see, they're both similarly sized. They're both in the neighborhood of the 5-inch barrel. We'll get more specific in a bit. But they also are an interesting contrast. There's obviously a lot of things that are different about them. There's almost 30 years, almost exactly 30 years difference between the two. The Model 645 was introduced in 1985, is when it hit the street, and the Glock 41 in 2014. So again, almost 30 years, 29 years, whatever. I think these guns really kind of represent 2 different eras in gun making, or the popularity and the design of guns. You know, we have the tried and true 1911 that has been around 100 years, and hopefully it'll be around 100 more, because it's, you know, it deserves to be. But aside from, you know, the occasional iconic gun that just lasts and lasts like that, guns go through evolution. They go through, quite honestly, fad and fashion, just like any other kind of product does. New technologies emerge. You know, new priorities emerge, and you know, so the marketplace reacts, the manufacturers respond, and guns change, right? So I think it's kind of interesting to look at something really old versus something really new, and this is not really old. I mean, I bought this gun when it was brand new, when it was first introduced, so I don't like to think of it as being terribly old. But then we have the brand new Glock 41, and of course the Glock design is not exactly brand new, and this Glock 41 is not exactly breaking any, you know, shattering any molds from the traditional Glock design. So it's not like this is the latest and greatest technology versus some ancient technology either. But nonetheless, there's obviously quite a bit of differences. And you know, back in the mid 1980s, this was considered the bee's knees, and in the you know, in the mid 2000 teens, I think, you know, you could argue the same for the Glock 41. Certainly the Glock in general, without a doubt. So let's look at some of the differences. Let's start with the Smith & Wesson Model 645. We'll put the Glock out of the way for a minute. Actually, we'll just scoot that over there. So let's start with the 645. A little bit of history on this. This, as I said, it hit the street in 1985. I bought this gun, this specific gun, when they were first available. You know, the minute Smith & Wesson made them available. I had an FFL at the time, so I was able to, you know, contact the distributor in advance and say, look, the minute you get 645s, you know, I got to have one. So I got this gun right away, as soon as it was available. So why did this gun come to be, this 645? What was its reason for being? Because it didn't last very long. It was only in production for about 3 years, so it had a pretty short life. So what was its reason for being in the first place? Well, it was really kind of an answer to a demand in the market for Smith & Wesson to create a 45 ACP semi-automatic pistol, of which they did not have, and sort of follow on the popularity and the proven record of the Model 39 and the related series of Model 39s. You had the 439, 539, 639. I had a 639, still have it. And so this was sort of Smith & Wesson's answer to, how come you guys don't make a 45 ACP, you know? And of course, the 45 ACP back then, just as it is today, that was the benchmark and the standard was the Model 1911. And so that was really what you were going to be judged against and compared to if you made a 45 automatic, especially back in those days. Again, we're talking about, this is before polymer, before the lightweight, even before aluminum alloys and things like that. Okay, so that's why they made the gun. And it started out being pretty popular right away, you know, and back in the mid 80s, you know, at least in my world. And again, I had an FFL. I was active in the industry, and, you know, by all accounts that I was aware of, Smith & Wesson was king. So when this gun was introduced, it was introduced to some pretty good popularity. It was well received. I liked it. I still do like it. I like it a whole lot. It was featured for 2 consecutive seasons on the very popular Miami Vice program. This was the everyday carry of Sonny Crockett. What, you don't think this could be an everyday carry? Well, guess what? This was my everyday carry for a while too. But this is how you had to rock the 645. So yeah, we carry a little differently these days, but you know, when you got something like this, that's how you did it. And back then, that was how it was done. So right now, there's a magazine in this gun, but the gun's empty. We lock it back, take a look, empty, and empty. So one of the first things to point out about this gun, this is a double action, single action. So the first pull, in other words, you could have a round chambered full magazine in the gun, carry it the way it is right now, and you have a double action initial pull. It's a heavy pull. We'll put a gauge on it and measure it, but it's a very smooth pull. And you fire that first round. And now, of course, when you do that, that action's going to cycle, and then from there on, you're in single action mode. Let me pop this magazine out and demonstrate that. Okay, so the hammer stays cocked after that first shot, and now you're in single action mode. Now, this will take me to one of the things I don't like about this gun. Magazine disconnect safety. And yeah, Smith & Wesson is still doing that with some M&Ps. I know it's optional. Thank God it's optional. On this gun, it was not optional. But very light single action. So, again, dead trigger without a magazine. With a magazine. Functional. Now here's another thing. So let's say you fired a shot and you have a cocked hammer. The safety is also ambidextrous, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. The safety is also a hammer drop. So think about the decocker on a Sig Sauer. This was sort of an early form of that, different style, because it incorporates an external safety with the decocking device. And the way that works is, if you can see, right here, I'll work this safety. Let me zoom in a little bit. I'm just going to hold the hammer back. As you rotate the safety down, you see the back of you see the firing pin, As you rotate the safety down, the firing pin's in sort of a keyhole, and this cam rotates around it, okay? Prevents the hammer from being able to strike the firing pin. It is physically impossible for the hammer to be able to touch that firing pin now. So, and moving the safety also releases the catch for the hammer and drops it, but not until it's covered the firing pin. So your safety creates a dead trigger, puts the hammer in a position where it cannot physically contact the firing pin, right? So it also makes it 100% drop safe and gives you a dead trigger. So that's how the safety functions. Now this one has the ambidextrous safety. This has bugged me since day one, and here's what bothers me about it. See how loose that is? I deliberately have left it loose since shooting it, since doing the range portion of this video, because it works itself loose almost immediately as soon as you start shooting it. Now the answer to that obviously is to use some Loctite, which I do, but it still works loose. Almost the only thing that's not stainless steel is, the nylon grips, which, by the way, some people will still refer to these as plastic. They are nylon, which is got a whole different feel. It's certainly a whole different life, and durability. They're pretty good grips. I've left them stock and always liked them. They've got a really nice checkering built into them, and they're incredibly flat, so I liked them. The mainspring housing is pretty well checkered, and there's some checkering on the front strap as well. You also had checkering in the front of the trigger guard. Now you notice the sort of very 1911-esque slide stop and takedown pin. Magazine release as well, very 1911-esque. Function and design, size, feel, everything about it. Even the look of the slide and the dust cover, very similar to a 1911. The thickness is incredibly similar to a 1911. It's a very thin gun. It's a single stack 45. Came with an 8-round. I don't know if we can see the numbers here. This is one of the stock magazines that came with the gun. I was able to find some aftermarket 10-round extended magazines, and I've got 1 or 2 of those. I've also got some aftermarket 8-round, actually some Smith & Wesson 8 rounds with rubber base plates on them, or plastic base plates. But these are the original, all stainless steel magazine. Again, inside and out, everything, even the spring, as far as I know, is stainless steel. The follower is stainless steel. And again, this is original. I never had any problem with the magazines. I never had any problem with the gun, period, at all. This gun doesn't misfeed. It doesn't misfire. It works every single time. I'm trying to think in 30 years if I've ever had a misfire or a misfeed, and I don't think I have. That's how reliable this gun has been. So as I mentioned, this gun was only made for 3 years. And after 3 years, Smith & Wesson threw in the towel on the 645, and I got to be honest, I don't know if it was due to poor sales or they just felt that they had, they really kind of gave up the 645 for the 4505 line and the related guns in that line. They went to that 4-digit numbering system instead of the 3-digit. Now, as far as field strip and such, this gun is certainly not as easy as today's modern polymer guns. Not quite as difficult as a 1911. It's kind of somewhere in between. It really is kind of a hybrid in that respect. So let's take a look at that process. And it breaks down very much like a 1911. Our slide stop is also the takedown pin. So we pop it loose. Okay, we run our slide off the front. Guide rod is full length and is stainless steel. Spring, obviously, as you can see, is not a captured spring. It's also, I believe this is also a stainless steel spring. The barrel is kind of a combination. It comes out through the rear, or through the breech, not out the front like a 1911. So big difference there. The barrel lug is different, more like today's modern guns. So it's a bit of a departure. It's a locking breech, but a bit of a departure. This one is dirty from being fired, but again, all one piece. So, and as you can see, rather than go with a separate barrel bushing for the 645, Smith & Wesson incorporated that right into the barrel. So it's all one piece. Feed ramp, part of the barrel. In the front, again, bushingless design. So yeah, there you go. There's your basic field strip for the 645. It's a little different, but there you go. That's the 645. I'm going to go ahead and clean it while I've got it apart, and then we'll take a look at the Glock 41, talk about what's different between the two. And of course, Glock pretty much wrote the book on the easy field strip. So with a Glock, remove the magazine, make sure the gun's empty, pull the trigger, squeeze, remove the slide, guide rod, and recoil spring, barrel, and that's it. Function test, you're done. Okay, head-to-head in the slugfest. The Smith & Wesson 645, circa 1984. The Glock 41, circa 2014. Little bench testing, get a feel for their accuracy. Using Remington UMC 230 grain ball ammo. I shot both the 645 and the 41 from a rest at 15 yards using Remington UMC 230 grain ball. This is an ammo that I've found to be pretty reliable in the past for accuracy baselines. The Glock seemed to like the UMC a little better than the Smith did, producing a tighter group. But then I like the sight picture of the True Glows a whole lot better than the iron sights on the Smith, so I'm sure that played a part too. Let's see what the trigger pull is in double action on the 645. Exactly 10 pounds. Exactly 10 pounds. Single action. £5, 8 ounces. Trigger pull on the Glock is £5, 8.5 ounces. Okay, with an empty magazine. Let's see. This thing weighs 2 pounds, 7.5 ounces. And for comparison, with an empty magazine, the Glock 41 weighs 1 pound, 11.5 ounces. So there they are. Two pistols that are very distinctly different and yet also very similar in many ways. The Glock 41 Gen 4, a brand new 2014 gun, and the Smith & Wesson Model 645 from 1985. So, again, the purpose behind the Slugfest is really just to sort of compare and contrast different 45s that I have, kind of as I come to them. I'm trying to put them together in some sort of interesting way because these are very similar in terms of barrel length. They are both kind of representative of where the state of the art was in each manufacturing period. I mean, in the mid 1980s, you really couldn't get any better than this. This was, in my opinion, this was the pinnacle of where we were with handgun technology in the mid 1980s. It's a work of art. I'm happy to have it in my collection. I'm proud to have gotten it when it was brand new, and I'm glad I've kept it all these years, and I plan on continuing to keep it. And on top of all of that, it is a shooter. I mean, this thing is a sweet gun to shoot. That double action trigger at exactly 10 pounds and as smooth as it is. And of course, the Glock 41 is today's, I'm not going to say it's cutting edge technology, because the Glock is almost the statement in simplicity. But, simplicity is what a lot of people are looking for today. And simplicity is something that I am attracted to sometimes with respect to guns, depending on the purpose. It's a gun that you can torture test. It's a gun that's gonna, you can drop this thing in the mud, in the sand, in the dirt, and if you can find it, you can shoot it. And I'm not sure I would say the same for this 645. It's definitely a little more finicky, requires a little more TLC. So the Glock absolutely has its place. The Glock 41 is, what's cool about the Glock 41 is it's basically, and I've done a video about it before, but it's the Glock 21 frame exactly, with a lighter, thinner, but longer slide on it. So you've got that extra inch of barrel. You've got a lighter slide. And you've got that great 13 round, 13+1 capacity. In the Smith & Wesson, we're talking about an 8+1 capacity. With an aftermarket magazine, you can go to a 10+1. 10+1 is not bad, but that thing sticks way out the bottom. Sight radius favors the Glock 41 a little bit. You can see that if we go to where the rear sight is and the back, and now this has aftermarket sights on it, it would even be longer with stock. Well, let me line it up to where the stock sights would be. I'm going to the middle of my dovetail here, and the stock front sight would be about here. So you've got probably, out of the box, you would have, I'm guessing, just about an inch or nearly an inch of advantage on the Glock 41. Otherwise, these two guns are just about the same length. The slide is a little longer on the Glock, but again, we've got an internal striker here, and where we have an external hammer. So there they are. Episode 2, 45 Slugfest. Smith & Wesson 45 ACP Model 645. The Glock 45 ACP Model 41 Gen 4.